Hi, this is Isabel. Let's learn. Today's video is about how do you know if you're too broad in your job search, meaning that maybe you're targeting a little bit too wide. This is always something that's complicated. Do I target a little bit broad? For most people, it means that maybe I get more opportunities, I can fit in a little bit better. Whereas if I target more on something specific, then I won't be taken into account for other positions. So it's always the challenge of most people is either they position themselves too broad or they position themselves too narrow. And the job of a career consultant like myself is to find the happy medium. So it's not that you're completely out there, spreading your resume everywhere, hoping you get something. And it's not to be so narrowed down into a specific that no one calls you either. So you just have to find this happy medium. So how do you find this happy medium? It's a mix of different techniques that I use when I work with individuals. It's not easy because, again, it requires understanding what the Swiss are looking for. Also, my understanding of my job in human resources, of what consultants are looking for in recruitment. So I will try to give you some tips here, some manageable information. So the first thing is that to position yourself well in a resume or in an application, if you don't want to be too broad, is to actually define what others are doing in the same field. So if you do a quick search on LinkedIn, for example, in the city where you're looking for a job, is to see what others are posting out there in their header. For example, it gives you an idea. So if you're in marketing and you look at people in marketing in Geneva, and you can see some names of people, what is the common theme that keeps coming back? What wording are they using? If you're looking in Zurich, same thing. What is the wording? It can be different from one city to another. In some places, they might be looking for more branding. In other cities, they might be looking for, I don't know, digital expertise. So you just have to be aware of the market. That's something that I will say again. If you put a resume out there with a generic name, maybe something you've used because in your country it's what's required, but in Switzerland it's not. So just in general, know that in Switzerland right now there's a huge effort to digitalize everything, and I think it's not just Switzerland. So meaning that most jobs right now are in tech, in digital. This is also what the feedback I'm getting from clients and non-clients on the market. People say everything is digital. So if you don't have those skills, if you're not someone who was trained to work in digital, your opportunities are also limited. And especially if you come in a space where you're not trained for digital, you can't really position yourself for the local market, like those service jobs, because you don't speak the local language. So you're really going to be confined in a very narrow market. So you just need to watch this. That's my first tip. Really look at the jobs and see what is the percentage of jobs that you could seriously apply for. And I don't mean, to say, I saw a job, I'm just applying and see what happens. I mean, seriously, that you can actually say, I'm very qualified for this position, because I have the training, because I speak the languages, etc. What is, in all honesty, the amount of positions that you see? And just be aware of that, that if you're too broad at some point, if you're applying in the wrong areas, nothing is going to happen. So really, this is the step number one, is how big of a market that you have. So this is very important. And I'll give you the example of a company, because in the end, you are a company. When you're looking for a job, you're trying to find people who want to work with you as an employer. So you're providing the service, and you're looking for someone who wants to buy the service from you. So really, it's like thinking in terms of a company. If you're making, for example, I'll put it for you in real terms so you understand a little bit what I mean. If you're making raincoats, for example, imagine if you make raincoats and you plan to market these raincoats in the south of France, for example, or in, let's say, in Tahiti, or I don't know, a city where it's really hot. Dubai would be a good example, So do you really think you're going to get a lot of customers who buy raincoats in Dubai or in southern France? Probably not many, because the weather is so great. You probably don't even wear a raincoat ever there. So you're going to go out of business. Well, it's the same thing with your skills and the market. If you have this great skill in something that's amazing and you have a PhD, but there's no real need in Switzerland for that skill. And it happens so many times with my clients where they had great skills, but the country doesn't need them. So maybe the better way to look at it is to say, which other country would really pay me well for this skill set? So Switzerland is not necessarily a great answer for everybody. I mean, it's a great answer if you're an expert in watchmaking, if you're in pharma, if you work as a international development with the UN, then this is the right choice and you will get lots of opportunities. But if you've trained in something very specific, and I'm just trying to think of examples as I'm speaking, but if you train in something that's very specific, maybe very targeted for specific regions in the world, and you come to Switzerland and you realize, well, why am I going to be able to practice this skill? A good example is medical. In most countries, you need to be retrained completely from scratch when you're a doctor. This is the case in Switzerland. I had a client at one point who was a doctor and had to drop this and redo everything because she couldn't be hired as a doctor with a diploma from another country. So one video, and I will link it below as well, when I talk about what to do, especially if you're the person who's following a partner. You know, I give some good examples of very mobile kind of careers. I'm really all about mobile careers, you know, laptop careers, where you can do that from anywhere and be successful in any country as long as you build up your followers or your client base. But there's those jobs that are really easy to do everywhere, you know, language teacher, all that stuff. Now, if you're a doctor, if you're in those skill set that's really, really, really very targeted, maybe Switzerland doesn't need you, or maybe they don't accept the credential from your country and you have to redo everything, which is tough if you're in your late 30s, 40s. Then it, you know, it includes a lot of things like training again. And then we all know if you train again in Switzerland, trying to get in, you're going to be in competition with people who have already a lot of experience. So for me, it just opens up a can of worms that is not really practical. And if you can do it in a different way, I would recommend it. So really, for me, if you're too broad in your job search, think really about whether Switzerland is the right choice for you. Also, number two is you won't get a job offer if you're too broad, because people will say, you know, this is not what we need. We need someone who can actually be on the... Now companies want people who are active the day after they get hired and don't need any training and can be very effective. So this is also something to think about. You know, can you train? Can you start immediately and be 100%, take on the job 100%? Now, also another way to see that you're too broad is when you go to networking events, people don't understand what it is that you're doing. That's good feedback. Or you get questions, you know, a lot of questions, or people don't stay in touch with you. That's also, if you have, for example, if you go to 3-4 networking events and each time people don't stay in touch with you, they don't want to connect again, probably you did not do something that's interesting for them. So gives you also some feedback on the fact that you're too broad and you need to find something that's a little bit more connected to the local market. So all these things will give you indicators that I talked about that you're not in the right fit. So again, for me, it's really not a deal breaker, meaning that Switzerland is not the only place. So you have two choices. Either you Swisscize your profile. Again, watch my webinar where I talk about how to get a job in Switzerland. You have to rebrand yourself completely, retrain yourself. Again, and I just said it 5 minutes ago, it's complicated. You will be in competition with the local market, etc. But it's one option. Second option is to look at other countries. So if you're personally, if I had invested, you know, 10 years plus to be a doctor, the hell, I would stay a doctor forever. I mean, I'm not spending 10 years of my life, and I'm saying this very authentically with you right now. If I spend 10 years of my life to become a doctor, I will stay a doctor until I die, because there's no way I'm taking on 10 more years of studies or even 4 more years of studies in something that I may not even like in the end. So really for me, the retraining part, you have to be very ready for it. In my view, again, if it's a small thing, for example, you go from being maybe working for a company and you become, and you work on the agency part, or, you know, you were in HR and you become a coach like me, it's like no brainer. But if you're going to retrain yourself in something that takes years and years of training, it's huge. So my option number two, in my view, is much more logical, would be to find a country that really appreciates your training. So it could be any country that would take your application as it is, really enjoy the fact that you have experience, and really reward you for it. And there's ways, and there's countries where there's not a huge amount of changes that you need to make. And this is something, if you're considering migration in a partnership with a husband or something like that, This is something I would strongly, strongly encourage you to talk about before you're faced with the situation. So I hope this video was helpful, and feel free to post below. Again, watch the links that I put below. This will give you also a lot of resources, and I will talk to you soon.